Hey everyone, Switch Down Player. It is time for another fairy video, and this time is about Storm King's possible conquest. Since Storm King conquered every kingdom that he came across, unlike Abyssinians, Capper's homeland, and even tried to take over Mount Eris, the Hippogriff's kingdom, and took over temporarily over Equestria before he was defeated. But what other kingdoms like the Dragonlance? Would he even try to conquer it? Even when Storm King had conquered the Abyssinians' homeland and took all the valuable treasures and burned down the palace, before he had even set his eyes on Equestria, what if he had focused on a different land like the Dragonlance for once? Since the Dragonlance is a very vast land of barren landscape with no cities at all, and even though that this was something that this land probably is that Storm King could consider to conquer, but in my opinion, there is a big no. Other than that, this Dragonlance doesn't even have any particular value towards Storm King to be interested in. So even if Tempest Shadow or any other of his service would have told them about this land of dragons. But even though the dragons are known to be greedy and collect all kinds of values from things like treasures, even if Storm King heard about this, and even if he managed to somehow collect all the dragons' treasures for himself, under that, this Dragonlance wouldn't be any nothing worth to him at all. Since without the treasures from the dragons, there would be not much any value left though. He would just take the dragon's treasures and leave, without even considering even further conquest of the Dragonlance. But even if he would do so, the dragons would have put up a really strong resistance against the Storm King's forces. But even if so, even if the Storm King heard about this, and even if Tempest Shadow had heard about this strategy, the dragons are being greedy and have been collecting all kinds of treasures over the years of his lifetime, and I don't think that the Storm King would even consider to be going there, knowing that the dragons would put up erotic quite resistance towards him, and his ships would not stand any chance against the dragons' fire breathing, and they're also fast flyers in the sky, which would be giving them a strong advantage against the Storm King's airships. So, in my opinion, Storm King would not even consider to conquer the Dragonlance at all. And even despite having all the treasures in the Dragonlance that the dragons had gathered, even though Storm King probably wanted to have these treasures, but he realized that there would not be much a good chance of even considering a good risk to even try to even go to the Dragonlance, knowing that the dragons don't even have any such magic much at all like that, or even though they only had gathered some of the treasures they have, but it would still not wouldn't put in much a risk or chance toward it to take this dragon's treasures. So even if he would have heard stories about the dragon's enormous treasures, even though he wouldn't want to jeopardize his own airships in order to get there. So even if this were a values of him, he probably would stay told his fleet to stay away from the Dragonlance for all their safety, and even not want to jeopardize his own fleet and his forces into the hands, or in this case, the claws of the dragons. Knowing that even though the dragons may still possess a very much a good treasure that he really want to have, but in his mind, and even thinking clearly, I don't think that he would even jeopardize his own forces, and especially the airships. So even if he had a fleet of say 10 or 15 airships, and even he had strong fighters and maybe some skilled fighters on board, and it still would not be a good chance. Even if he managed to barely escape with some of the remaining of ships, it probably would be more like only a handful or maybe a few ships left. So even in my opinion, the Dragon Lords, the Dragonlance are nothing that is nothing that the Storm King would even consider to conquer. Even if there weren't any dragons there anymore, then he probably could have taken the chance to take their treasure. But other than that, Dragon Lord, Dragonlance were being considered off limits even for Storm King himself, informing his forces to stay away from the Dragonlance, not to jeopardize his own fleet in order to his campaign on conquering other kingdoms. So, in my theory, would Storm King even consider conquer Dragonlance? In your opinion, no, because I don't believe he wanted to jeopardize his own fleet and forces to gather the treasures that the dragons even had. But even then, we don't even know exactly how much treasure they even had, though. It could be into. I don't believe that all dragons have collected all their treasures in one place. No. The dragons itself may have individually have a small hoard of treasure, but even though each dragon may have a small size of treasure to collect themselves, and still, the Dragon Storm King would not even consider to be conquering the Dragon Lord or the Dragonlance because it has been a very difficult chance or even difficult to do so. Knowing how greedy and how much resistance the dragons would put up if they find out that someone is trying to steal their treasures. So, in my opinion, Storm King would not even want to risk considering conquering the Dragonlance at all. So, like I said, my opinion, the Dragonlance would be off limits from Storm King and his forces. Even though so, even if he really wanted to have to conquer it, but I don't think that he would even want to take the risk to jeopardize his own fleet and other things. So, if anyone has their own opinions or thoughts about this, do you think that Storm King would conquer the Dragonlance despite being have much value, except for the treasures that each dragon had gathered himself? I mean, there are no cities at all. There are no palace, no castles that the Dragon Lord lives in, or at least what we know of. So, other than that, do you think Storm King would even considering to conquer the Dragonlance? Let me know in the comment section below. This is Switch Diablo, over and out.